everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the topic sources of finance. Before moving to the topic, let's see what is finance. Finance is defined as the provision for money at the time when it is required. Finance is considered as the lifeblood of business because it is interconnected with all the major business activities. If the finance is not properly arranged at the right time, it will lead to the stoppage of business activities. The requirement for finance is classified into two, that is, long-term financial requirement and short-term financial requirement. Now, what is long-term financial requirement? Finance, which is required for creating the production facilities through the acquirement of the fixed assets such as the plant and building, plant and machinery, etc. are known as the long-term financial requirements, which is also known as fixed capital requirements. Now, the second one is short-term financial requirements. Short-term finance requirements are those requirements for money in order to meet the day-to-day expenses, such as purchase of raw materials, payment of wages, etc. Now, moving to the topic, that is sources of finance. Sources of finance is classified on different bases, and the first type of classification is based on the period. That is, based on the time period, it is classified into three. That is, short-term sources, medium-term sources, and long-term sources. What is long-term sources? The long-term source of finance is finance which is repayable after a period of more than 5 years. And the examples of long-term sources are equity shares, preference shares, long-term loans, fixed deposit, retained earnings. Now, moving to the medium-term sources. Medium-term sources of finance are those finance which is repayable within a period of 5 years. And the examples of medium-term sources are medium-term loans, debentures, public deposits. Now, moving to the short-term sources. Short-term source of finance which is repayable within a period of 1 year. And the examples are bank credit, which is also known as bank overdraft, then trade credit, then factoring, and also money market instruments like coal money market, certificate of deposits, etc. So the first classification is based on the period, that is classified into three, that is long-term sources, medium-term sources, and short-term sources. Now the second classification is based on the ownership. Based on ownership, it is classified into two, that is owner's fund and borrowed fund. So what is owned fund? From the name itself, it is defined that it is owned by the business itself. That is, like, the examples for owned funds are the share capital, retained earnings, profit and surplus, etc. And the second thing is the borrowed fund. The borrowed fund is the fund which is borrowed from externally, that is externally from outside the organization. So the borrowed fund examples are debentures, bonds, etc. So the second type of classification is based on the ownership. On the basis of ownership, it is classified into two, that is owned fund and borrowed fund. Owned fund which is owned by the business itself, and borrowed fund which is borrowed from externally from other sources. Now the third type of classification, that is third type, is based on the source of finance. That is based on the source of generation of finance. It is divided into two, that is internal source and external source. Internal source means that the finance is generated within the business concern itself. And the internal sources, the examples are plowing back of profit, retained earning, profit net surplus, depreciation funds, etc. Now, the second thing is the external sources. External sources of finance are this finance which is gathered from externally from outside the organization. So that is, the examples are shares, debentures, public deposits, and loans. So the third classification is based on the source of finance, and it is divided into two, that is internal source and external source. Now moving to the last type of classification, that is based on the mode of financing. Based on mode of financing, it is classified into three. That is security financing or external financing. Second one is internal financing, and third one is loan financing. So first one is security financing or external financing, which is consisted of the security ownership securities like equity shares and all, and creditorship securities like debentures, bonds and all. And the second thing is internal financing. Internal financing is that which is created internally within the business concern. And the examples of internal financing is the retained earnings, plowing back of profits, capitalization of profits, etc. And the third is the loan financing. Loan financing is raising funds through the loans like short-term loans, medium-term loans, and long-term loans. So this is the last type of classification, that is based on mode of financing. And that's all about the topic. So now I'm winding up my class. Thank you.